Welcome to the Yoga Teacher Circle podcast. I'm your host, Taylor WRAY. Yoga teacher, you are needed now more than ever, and your unique voice, message, and offering needs to be shared with the world. In this podcast, we'll talk about all things related to teaching yoga to help you thrive doing what you love most, teaching yoga. So let's dive in. Excited to have you on today, Christy. This conversation is all about building community through yoga events. So Christy and I, we met in Thailand over 3 years ago, about 3.5 years ago, in our 300-hour yoga teacher training. We were partners for different sections in the program, so we really bonded through that. We did like Thai massage together, hands-on adjustments, and it was amazing. I haven't seen you since, and I've been following your journey though, and have watched all the amazing work that you've been up to in the last few years. The most exciting thing that I want to talk about today is the nonprofit, the company that you started up called Grip the Mat. This badass nonprofit that builds community through yoga events. And you take yoga outside of the studio model, which I'm all about. So let's dive in. Let's go back a little bit and talk about what inspired you to become a yoga teacher and then how that led into starting up Grip the Mat.
All right. Taylor, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so glad we could figure out the tech. And it's so great to see you, and I love seeing all the work that you do within the yoga community for yoga teachers, and it's really special and inspiring. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you.
And what led me to be a yoga teacher, besides loving yoga and yoga being a part of my life since I was young, I really wanted to work hands-on with people. And right out of college, I was working at like an entry-level job in a law firm. It felt really meaningless to me, even though there was cool parts of the job. And it sounds really weird, but I just really wanted to use my hands and like touch people. Like I wanted that to be a part of my job.
I get that.
Where it was like not just, it wasn't just allowed, like in like a law firm, there's like HR where it's like not allowed, but it was encouraged. And it was actually part of like the service and that kind of connection.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the teacher training while I was working the job. But then by the end of the training, I realized like, why don't I just do this now that I can professionally? So dove straight in.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so once you started teaching, how long was it until you started up Grip the Mat?
It was a few months in. I just went all in.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't have as much experience as the senior teachers, just like starting these yoga events. I don't know, with like a big ego or anything. Like I knew I had still so much room to go. But I also knew that I had like gifts and skills in other ways in bringing people together. And I kind of just knew that would be enough to get started. And I'm so glad I did. Because I don't know where I got the courage to like yoga events thing right away.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about Grip the Mat and what you stand for.
We are a yoga social events organization, and we're all about breaking the barriers, making yoga accessible. Yeah, our mission is to build a community that's based in mindfulness and togetherness. And we do that in a few different ways, not just by bringing people together and sharing the practice and sharing a social hour, but also by like continually cultivating this sense of connection to community by sending proceeds from ticket sales to awesome local charities that we feel do really meaningful work.
I love that. So why did you choose to start yoga events and not start teaching in different studios and kind of the standard approach that new yoga teachers take when they're just starting out?
Sure. I've managed a yoga studio as well as teaching as many classes as I could. So that opportunity definitely was there. However, I also did a bunch of other things on the side to help myself survive in an expensive city. But things that I really liked. Yes. So this all started in Washington, D.C. I was like helping to manage this basement art gallery. I was also like learning how to manage a bar on top of all the yoga things. But it's actually like those parts, those jobs felt really integral to who I was too, even though it was like managing a bar and teaching yoga is really different. And in a lot of ways, you'd think they'd contradict each other. But to me, it didn't feel that way. I just saw
what like kept it in this union for you? What parts of each thing felt like it was kind of whole?
I think with both, it's all about balance, right? It's like everything in moderation. And when done correctly, can be a really beautiful way to bring people together. It's like at the yoga studio, it's funny, like you'd be in this yoga class and you probably would be really good friends with the people to your right and left, but you never really had that chance because you had to get out of the way for the next class. With the yoga events, it was creating a space for us to all hang out by adding on the social component afterwards, but also ended up happening was making it really inviting to people who otherwise wouldn't join the yoga practice. Because let's be honest, the yoga studio can be really intimidating for someone who's brand new.
Totally, 100%.
Just wanted to practice with my friends. And it's funny because there's this social component afterwards. People who normally wouldn't have time for yoga suddenly had time, because they always had time to do like happy hour with their friends or whatever. So it made sense for a lot of people. In a way, it wasn't the mission, but it kind of like killed two birds with one stone. It's like you take care of yourself, you meet other people. It's great. And then it just, transformed into something so much bigger and better than anything I could have ever hoped for.
Well, that's awesome. How long ago did you start it?
Years, believe it or not.
Oh, 5 years. That's so cool. Yoga events look really different all across the board, right? So what does a Grip the Mat event look like? Where do you have them? Do you only have them in like one location in Washington? Are they around the country?
So in the past, we started these yoga social events where we'd pop up in different locations. They started in Washington, D.C. and think kind of like non-traditional spaces. So it wasn't a yoga room. It wasn't even just like the conference room of a hotel, which I know there's some yoga, but like really interesting spaces that I thought I just wanted to kind of explore more. Maybe there's like a street art gallery or like a fine art gallery, lots of art galleries, I guess, dance halls, just kind of places where you might find yourself anyways.
What about like brunch spots, little restaurants and cafes? Did you do that?
Yeah, we didn't do that many restaurants, but we brought the restaurant experience with us, which was a lot of work, to be honest, but so much fun. Mm-hmm. So we'd have like a chef come in and make a brunch, but we'd be in like this abandoned church that was taken over by graffiti artists. So fun. They started in DC, and then it was really funny because again, you just started this because it seemed like a fun idea personally, but then people started asking if they could help out, and it kind of just snowballed into this big beautiful thing where like lots of people were involved, and it was almost like I had to like pinch myself. I was like, are you sure are you sure you want to volunteer your time?
Wow. You had a team that would help you set the events up.
Yeah. And it was just like a group of friends who, it's beautiful because otherwise wouldn't have known each other. This family within the bustling city. And, even people would email us like, hey, I'm in Boston. Can I host an event? And we're like, yeah, sure. And it just, said yes to a lot and ended up hosting in multiple cities at the same time, which was really cool.
So did that look like having teachers elsewhere, a teacher in Boston saying, I want to be an ambassador and host a Grip the Mat event? And then would you go out there and help them run it, or would you just teach them how and they would do it on their own?
We would go out there, run it with them for a while. And then if they felt like they wanted to run with it,
cool,
they'd run with it. And not going to lie, it was a lot. It was a lot to take on. And, I was really young. I was like 22, or I think it was 22. learned through experience that you can't be everything to everyone, and you don't have to say yes to every awesome opportunity that comes your way. I just learned the importance of knowing what is important to you before deciding which direction to take your life.
Now, with COVID, with the pandemic, now we can't gather in these spaces where you can be mat to mat and have this awesome energy and community. So how did it shift how you're hosting events now? What's that look like today?
It's such great timing that we should talk, because for a while I had no idea what to do. So did online yoga classes, which were great. And I actually spent the summer away from Grip the Mat and working with another organization, helping them with their online summer camp, teaching yoga to kids. It's called the Fresh Air Fund. They do amazing work. They provide this programming to children and families free of charge to them, and usually bring them outdoors into nature, because they're living in the concrete jungle of New York. But this was the first year that they couldn't do that. So I worked with them to bring their summer camp online, and it was the most eye-opening experience working with these kids online with all the struggles of figuring out the internet and how to build connections that way. Just totally cracked my heart wide open in a way that I couldn't have ever expected. So I spent the summer doing that, taught online classes still with Grip the Mat, and that was beautiful. But at the end of the summer camp, and kind of just took a pause, and I still felt the desire to be with people in person.
Yeah.
And so, just last week, we hosted this event that was kind of like a test. We're like socially distant, and we did it outdoors, which hosting outdoors, it's like, you don't know with the weather. So sometimes it's like a terrible idea because it just rains. I'm like, what do I do? But just thought, let's try this. Emailed people on like a Friday, and on Tuesday showed up, just had like my fingers crossed, fully aware. Sometimes people sign up with events and they don't show up, and it's outdoors, and, but then, people, started showing up like 15 minutes ahead of time. And then it was time to start, and like everyone was there, and we were 6 feet apart, and it was awesome. Yeah, we wore masks, and we were further apart, so we couldn't do fun things like partner poses or whatever, but like, it doesn't mean we can't connect. Like, we still made it a point to have everyone connect in ways that we could. And that was really special. And so my mission is to continue to do that and explore ways in person while we can. So stay tuned. Because that'll be developing.
Yeah, you're working on that right now. I get that. I bet it felt so good for everyone that showed up to like be with people too, right? Because everything has been so distant and online, and that lack of connection, which same as you, what you shared, like still learning how to have and create connection through the online space. If that's all we've got, sometimes that's all we've got. So how can we still connect? What did you learn through teaching online that did help to create connection through the online space? Do you have any tips for other teachers that are looking to do that?
Yes, I learned a lot. And it's funny because I was teaching kids. I felt like I learned like a lot. Like it was, but I think it was the same lessons as teaching with adults. It just was like fast tracked because kids are so honest, and first of all, it is totally possible to build connections. I think you have to really be willing to step out of your normal routine, because it's different. The energy is different. You can't, sometimes like when you're in person, when you're working with like the physical energy of everyone, it's just, it's different and so it's not there online. I think it's like games, and it works with adults. I did the same thing with the adults, where you give people the opportunity to kind of get to know each other, with icebreakers, and there are all these different ways you can do that. Utilize breakout rooms on Zoom. So like if it's a big class, you could kind of make little smaller groups. People can connect that way. I think also just not overthinking it. That makes sense. And the same thing with when you're in person, even it's like students are going to take away what they take away, and you'll never quite know what that is. And sometimes I'd be really shocked because I teach a class online, and I'd end the class and I'd think that surely wasn't beneficial to anyone. It just, I didn't get the feedback I thought I would have gotten. But then you get a review or a survey back from a student, wow, that was the first time I had something to look forward to all summer. And like the first time I, talked to other kids. And I just think it's really important to remember that like all you can do is your best, and that's totally enough.
Yeah.
So
you make a good point. It is challenging teaching online because you can't receive that energy in the way you do in person, where you can just kind of get that intuitive sense of the needs and like how everyone's doing, which is hard because we respond to feedback as teachers. Like we use that to continue in our teaching in that moment. So I've had the same experiences where I would teach an online class and you're just not sure, like you can't see everyone. How was that? You almost feel like you're like teaching to yourself when you're away from the computer and you're like, are there humans listening and watching?
Yes, especially when they don't have the camera on, because that's an option. Yes.
Yeah, so I get that. It's just, it's so different, but it's still possible to create that connection. And I mean, it's freaking awesome that we even have technology to do that. That's really cool at the same time, you know?
Absolutely. And online classes and events, it'll still be here, you know, and I think it's great that we all have this time to like really practice with it. So I definitely encourage everyone to at least dabble in it, because it's not going anywhere.
No, it's true. It's not going anywhere, and it's showing people what's possible. Like before the pandemic, I was like a week away from signing a lease to open up a yoga studio, a physical.
No way.
Yeah, like a week before like shit hit the fan. I found a location. I had investors. I was like, I found it. Like, I'm doing this. And then things started happening pretty fast with COVID. And I was like, what's going on here? And then it was this huge thing. And then there was, you know, isolation and lockdown, and gyms and studios closing. And I obviously was, hey, I'm not signing a lease. And then my investors were like, we're not going to invest right now, depending on what's happening. I was like, absolutely, right? Before I decided to open a studio, I was like, do I want to build an online business? Or do I want to build a physical yoga studio business? And I was really like at this crossroads for about a year. I was thinking about both because I knew they're both big and they would take all my energy. I didn't feel like I could do both at the same time in the way that I wanted to. It forced me to totally pivot. And I was like, okay, I'm building online, right? And so I'm just rolling with that. But even like, because I have my teacher trainings in person, and we're distance in the room and it's safe and everything. But now I'm like, okay, I want this hybrid model. Online has been great in some ways, and I still need the in-person because that's important to me.
Absolutely. I 100% agree that just online, the feeling, it needs a little bit of balance. So I think it's great that you're doing both. And similarly, it's like trying to put these in-person events together where possible, because I feel like it's like fuels the online too, because then you have that physical connection to go off of. So then the online suddenly like isn't draining.
It meshes together really nicely.
Exactly. And there's kind of more of, at least for me, feel more of like a purpose behind the online classes. So it's, hybrid. I think that would be like
the hybrid.
Would I go for? Yeah, the hybrid when possible.
Yeah.
With masks.
Hey, yoga teacher. If you're running a yoga business or you're just beginning to build your yoga business, which I know many of you are, definitely listen in. I just launched an online course and training for yoga teachers called Grow Your Yoga Business by Niching Down. Why is it even important to have a niche as a yoga teacher and yoga business owner, or as I like to say, a yogipreneur? Are you trying to grow your private client business? Stuck in the studio gym grind, teaching 15 to 25 yoga classes per week, which I used to be stuck in? Are you wanting to grow your income beyond $25 to $40 per class? Trying to become a full-time yoga teacher while working a part-time job in the meantime? Are you wondering where and how to find private clients and students? Wanting to build an online yoga business? Spinning around wondering, what do I even post on social media? How do I create content? Wondering how to create and fill your yoga classes, your events, your trainings, your retreats? It is the first step to building your brand and business. We can't be all things to all people. If you're trying to teach and speak to everyone, you end up speaking to no one. You end up blurring into the giant sea of yoga teachers without standing out, without sharing your unique voice and message. This online workshop is seriously incredible, and it's jam-packed with content to help you gain clarity on what your yoga niche is, who your ideal client is, and you'll learn how to create content with clear messaging so you attract the right people into your business, along with so much more. I really appreciate all of you who support and listen in to the Yoga Teacher Circle podcast. And I'd love to offer you a discount code to receive $10 off this course. Just simply use the coupon code YTCPodcast at the checkout. So I hope you'll join me, and if you're ready to jump in, you can find the course on my website at taylorrayyoga.com under Niche Yoga Biz Workshop. Now, back to the episode.
Okay, so when I first started leading yoga events, let me just tell you my story. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. I was probably like 5 years ago at this point, and I really wanted to teach yoga events. I saw all of my senior teachers teaching really cool yoga events, wearing the mic, the headset, speakers outside, hundreds of people. And I used to look at that I love community just like you do, right? And I want to do this. I want to teach events. But I had this idea in my head that someone had to ask me. I had to prove in some way that I'm this event teacher. A studio was going to ask me at some point if I wanted to lead their next event. So I waited until I realized that that was totally bullshit and I could create an event on my own. Right? So then I realized I can just start an event myself. If I want to lead events, just create an event. So I started Yoga in the Park, and I run it in Arizona every fall and winter on Saturdays, and then we're off in the summers. And so I started it 5 years ago, and it built. And I was like, I'm an event teacher now. But it was so interesting, that mindset block of I had to prove myself or something versus just taking action and starting, which is why I love your story too. A few months out of YTT, you didn't let that stop you. Hey, I want to do this thing. I want to bring people together in events. I don't want to teach in the studio model only. So what's your best piece of advice for newer teachers that maybe have that idea of, I want to step further out of the studio, but how do I do that? How do I start something up?
That's a great question. Start exactly where you are with who you know, with what you have, that it's absolutely enough, and I wouldn't let yourself get held back by thinking that success is hundreds of people. You can define whatever you think of success at, maybe it's 10 people or whatever. And then if you go above that, then it was extra successful. Great. You can feel good about it. But I think where I see a lot of other teachers kind of get stuck is when they let their idea of success be defined by what they see around them versus what they actually feel, if that makes sense. We all get to define that for ourselves. I just sense probably with a lot of new yoga teachers that letting go of the reins a little bit would be beneficial, and taking the pressure off for it to look a certain way, to be a certain kind of perfect, because we're all making that up. There's no perfect, there's no successful benchmark. It's literally, we all just make it up in our heads and we run with that. So really be empowered by the idea that you get to define what success means to you.
That's good. And that ties right into, like you said, not comparing your success or what your idea of success looks like to the other teacher doing it this way. It doesn't have to look like that. You can have 5 people show up to your event, and if you pour all your love into the 5 that are there, how much of an impact can that create? So it's not based off of numbers as in the definition of success. So that's a really good little piece of advice there. I love that.
Yeah. And, without getting into specific numbers, even we've had events where there's lots of people and that felt like a success. And we've had events with totally not that many people. And on paper, you're was this a success? But then actually in person, when you're experiencing it, it's 100% a success if you think of how meaningful it felt. And then also if you can give those 5 people or whatever the low number is in your head, your best, those people becoming your support and cheerleaders, like that's actually way more valuable than like an ocean of faces that you don't have that deep connection with, because that'll end up propelling you further.
Yeah, 100%. Because with the 5, you can create you have time to be with the 5 and like really connect, versus the 100 where you're just kind of everywhere and you're spreading your energy throughout, where there's still a great connection, but it's just not as deep as with the 5. So that's a really cool way to look at it too.
Yeah.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, you shared with me, and I love this, you have 2 favorite rules. The first rule is let it be easy, and the second one is bloom where you're planted. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the first one. What does that mean to you, letting it be easy?
All right, this is a rule that I've recently started to live my life by. And I only finally accepted it as something that was possible after years of not struggling, but really just accepting the notion that in order to feel successful, I had to like work really hard and struggle. So, and I think it was the pandemic, honestly, that made me realize that you can't force everything. So letting it be easy, really, it came about out of probably desperation, to be honest, because I was like, well, I'm trying to do it the hard way, and it's not really working out in a way that's sustainable to me, like just kind of wearing myself thin.
Grinding, hustling, and that culture that our society promotes.
Yes.
To achieve something, you have to grind your way to get it.
Yeah, exactly. And so coming for me, I came back to this country. I've been living abroad. I came back to this country a few months ago, like a totally clean slate. And truly, I was like, I don't know what to do, like, so yeah, I'm not going to figure this. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm not going to figure it out. So like, let me just see what happens. I just like open myself up to it. And yeah, I noticed, it's funny. I had this like logic is screaming no, while faith is whispering yes. And like, I noticed some opportunities start to arise where normally I'd be like way too busy and caught up in my own crap to recognize, but because I was in the space, total stillness here in the pandemic, I got to really look at them. And, I was like teaching with this summer camp online. Part of me is like, I don't know if that makes sense. It's not really, what you've been doing or what you've been working for, but there was just something inside me that was like, hell yes. And ever since that, I realized like, maybe I don't have all the answers. It's like, maybe I have a few things to learn. So yeah, letting it be easy is just an idea of like opening up to the opportunities and wisdom around me to help be guided, versus like take such a direct approach to getting to how I get to where I want to get, I think having that vision for where you want to get and what you want to do is so important. But at least for me, I got really tied up in the how, to the point where it just like, it wasn't working. Like my body wasn't responding well. My mind wasn't, I had trouble sleeping and stuff. So, I mean, it's basically just practice yoga is what the rule is.
It's the practice of non-attachment, right? Not being attached to what it looks like in the process, and trusting that you're going to get there if you continue following what you're aligned and taking aligned action, of course, right? But I love that. I mean, I sometimes have to stop myself too, because I can feel like I'm forcing my way there, and then it doesn't feel good. Or like you said, you start shutting down, or you're tired, you're not sleeping, or your body hurts or whatever. And like, those are all messages to listen to, like something's off, and like looking at that. And so just like surrendering to the flow of it and just trusting.
You're all about living in flow. And it was really like an invitation to myself to like be like, well, what if I didn't lose sleep over selling this event out? Like, let's just see what would happen, or like, what if I like only reached out to a handful of partners that I'm like really excited, and like see what they say. Maybe they say no, maybe they say yes, and then realizing that, what's yours is yours and can't be taken away from you. So you don't have to struggle for it. Mm-hmm. I hope that's like a satisfying answer.
Yes. Like you don't have to struggle for it. That's it right there. So let's move to the second one, bloom where you're planted. And I feel like we touched on this a little bit earlier too. So what does that mean to you, to bloom where you're planted?
this is where I see a lot of, I want to say younger people get caught up. I'm still pretty young, I think, but still, I think the idea of having to be somewhere in order to start laying the foundation for where you want to be in your career, or like waiting until you have all the right circumstances. Like I've tried it a couple times and I've seen lots of people get really hung up there because all it does is it's like you're just stalling because the perfect circumstances never actually show up. So it just keeps you in this stuck energy. And I think also it keeps your focus everywhere but where you are. And as we know with practicing yoga, like the power is in the now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, blooming where you're planted, I think for everyone with everything, not just like wanting to create a yoga career or something like that. There are people around you right now. Like if your focus is creating community, but like you're stuck inside in a pandemic, or I don't know, you're living at your parents' house or whatever it is, like look around wherever you are and notice what you have and who you're with. And more like, I'm just gonna guess that like there are opportunities for you to start growing right now. Mm-hmm. You know, and like, you know, it's probably unexpected. It's the pod that your nephew's in, or, you know, it's like the neighbors that you've like never really spent time with because you're always busy, or like, there's so much right here, right now. And waiting for anything else is just a missed opportunity.
Yeah, that goes hand in hand. I had an episode that was called Start Messy, Perfectionism is Paralyzing. And that goes hand in hand with that concept of like, you can wait forever until it's going to be like the right circumstance to feel like, okay, now that I have this thing, then I can start the thing that I really want to start. Versus that's never going to actually happen. Like you said, it's never going to actually be like the right time, or it's going to be perfect and set up. So you just have to start with what is there, with what you have, and with not knowing the answers too, I think is really important. I never really know the answer. You just got to keep doing it though. So yeah, that's good.
Not knowing the answers is definitely a big part of it. And I think it goes into like really building that trust muscle with yourself and like having faith in yourself too. So they're like things you can do to help you feel more comfortable blooming where you're planted.
Trusting yourself is a huge one.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's funny because like something like self-trust, when you have it, it's like you think it can't be taken away. But then, you know, like life gets messy. And so like sometimes you really do need to focus on that. Mm-hmm. And like maybe blooming where you're planted is like you just focusing on building your sense of self and trust. Mm-hmm. And then that'll lead you, you know, to the next step of being like, okay, you know, I can be fully rooted here too.
That's something that's actually been one of my mantras lately is I trust myself and the decisions that I make. Because being an entrepreneur, you got to make a lot of decisions. And when I don't know what choice to make, I'm stuck and nothing is in motion. And so I've learned, and I'm learning through the process, that there's really no like wrong or right. It's just choosing and then seeing if you like it or not. And if you don't, you can make another decision to pivot. So there's no wrong path that I'm realizing that you go down necessarily. It's just, okay, I'm going to make a choice, because sitting on the fence is like the worst place to be, and trusting that I'm making the right decision. And if it's not right, then I can pivot and make a different decision. So it's something that I'm really trying to build up in, especially with my business.
I love that. And I think that is so essential for building a sense of confidence, right? Mm-hmm. It's like knowing that, well, I'm going to do this, and whatever happens, I know that I'll be able to take care of myself, pivot again. Mm-hmm. I can start over or do something completely new. And I know it's so hard for like a lot of yoga teachers because we all feel so deeply. A lot of us are so empathic. And so it can be really hard sometimes to allow your perception of other people's disappointment, or, you know, like how other people feel about what you're doing. Like that can be really confusing sometimes too. And that's a kind of a different topic, but like I think it's also very important for yoga teachers to learn how to rinse those types of, I guess, energies out. So you can really listen to yourself. So you'll know when it's time to go in another direction, or you'll know when it feels right. You know, just like start to practice understanding how things feel in your body. That for me, that was just like very important. And it took a lot of effort. it was just something that like really piled up. So I needed to take time for that. And luckily, like this pandemic has given us lots of time.
Yeah, it's given us a lot of time to slow down and to do the inner work. Like you said, to let go of like other people's ideas or judgments or perception. So other people's ideas don't cloud what you really want to do or influence your decision. So yeah.
Because now especially, it's like, if I were just to close my eyes and tune in to the world, like no one's got the answer. Like no one does. So like if you're kind of channeling in the energies or the thoughts or opinions of anyone else, really, like it's not going to be in your best interest or highest good, because we're all just trying to figure it out too.
100%. That's good. Okay, so being a yoga teacher, being a space holder, a facilitator, serving others through events, through your teachings, we have to make sure that self-care is a huge priority. So what are your top 3 non-negotiables for your own self-care and in ways that you fill your own cup up so that you can show up and serve your community?
I love this question. Only 3. I've been doing a lot lately. But the non-negotiables, I like super basic, sit on the floor with my eyes closed. Like I do that and I just release. Like I just let go of everything that I know isn't mine, every doubt, heavy opinion, anything that feels sticky. And sometimes it takes a long time, so I try not to give myself like a time limit.
Okay.
Honestly, the biggest theme has been boundaries in a way that's like, I've never given boundaries as much thought as I have recently.
Is that boundaries with yourself and others, just everywhere? All the boundaries?
All the boundaries. No, I mean, boundaries mostly in a few different ways. With other people.
Yeah.
In being really assertive with how I spend my time and energy and who I spend it with, which goes back to being aware of like how it makes me feel and like really accepting it. It's like, well, when I spend a lot of time with this person, I actually don't think it's that supportive of like me being my best self. Like it's not to say, like you obviously can't avoid all the triggers in your life and stuff like that, but just being really honest with myself is like, oh, I don't know if this relationship is fostering my growth, and then, there's like so many different ways it just creating space to maneuver around that. But saying no, maybe it's like saying no to family members who want to talk about certain draining topics over and over. It's like as easy as that, but for me it makes a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
And just being okay with humanity 101 things we all need to do is like being okay with saying no to people and being okay with disappointing them. And at first it was so hard, because people who have been in your life and are so used to you being who they need you to be, when you start to set those boundaries and decide to only stand in who you need yourself to be, I found, it's not always the easiest for them.
Okay. So what's your last one?
I mean, saying yes to the things that feel great. For me, it's been like saying yes to the things that are easy, even if they don't make much sense logically. Like yes to the things that just like fill my cup up. Mm-hmm. Or if it's just like taking a bath because it feels good. Yeah. Just those things, and just saying yes to those things really are super nourishing in an important way.
So where can people find you and connect with you on Instagram?
Yes. I mean, let's talk. Instagram's the best. @GripTheMat. Yes. Stay tuned. We'll be posting stuff about our socially distant yoga events. And, if you want to partner with us on any socially distant yoga events, sky's the limit right now. Let's all talk. I love the group that you have on Facebook. And I think that's really special. And I hope people are taking advantage of that, because that's the gold right there.
Yeah. Awesome, Christy. This was great to see you, to connect with you, to chat, to hear all the updates. And I appreciate you sharing with the Yoga Teacher Circle community.
Well, thank you so much. And this was really special and so great to talk.
So good to talk.
Thank you so much for listening in today. I'd love to stay connected with you in between episodes. You can find me on Instagram @Taylor_Ray Yoga and join the free private Yoga Teacher Circle Facebook group, which is full of some pretty awesome and badass yoga teachers.